guys, welcome to this new video. Today we are going to talk about the difference between ClusterIP, NodePort, and load balancer. So let's start from the genesis. So the service in Kubernetes is actually the Kubernetes service is actually a Kubernetes API resource that is used to expose the application, right? If you want to have your application accessible, you are going to use service. Now we have three types of service: the ClusterIP, the NodePort, and the load balancer, for example. So today we are going to see the difference between those three. So let's jump into the topic. ClusterIP, right? ClusterIP provide internal communication within the cluster. So meaning that when you have a service type ClusterIP, you can only access your application within the cluster. You will not be able to access your application out of the cluster. Your application will only be accessible within the cluster. Now, the next service that we are going to see is the NodePort, right? NodePort exposes the external client by opening a port on each node. So when you want to access your application using an IP address and a port assigned to you by Kubernetes, so and the IP address here will be the external IP address of the node, or the internal IP address of the node if you are within a specific VPN, for example. And the last one is actually called the load balancer. So the cloud provider will provide you the load balancer for you to access the application in the browser. So simple. ClusterIP, if you go on the browser, you won't be able to access the application. Load balancer, the cloud provider will provide the load balancer for you so that you can access the application in the browser. NodePort, you'll be able actually to access the application in the browser using the IP address of one of the node and a port that is assigned to the service. So that's the difference between those three. And depending on your use case, you will pick one. So ClusterIP is mostly for port-to-port communication. So that's just a service that allows pod running in your cluster to communicate each other, right? We know that most of the applications are actually microservice applications, so and made of multiple ports, and those ports need to communicate each other. That is why there's a ClusterIP running in the cluster. Now, sometimes we want to access, for example, the client of the application. We can use load balancer, which is actually provided by the cloud provider, and we can resolve this load balancer to something like www.devopseasylearning.com or www.google.com, for example, my famous website.com. And we can also use ClusterIP when you want to use like an IP address. We can also resolve the IP address in the port using something called like an NGNS reverse proxy, or using any type of reverse proxy that your company might be using. So that's just the difference between the three. I hope you guys like the video. See you guys in the next video. Please don't forget to subscribe and like. Thank you.